Germany's disease control agency has raised its coronavirus risk assessment to high. The head of the country's public health institute says stricter measures are necessary to contain the spread of the virus. That's due to increasing warning signs from German clinics that the number of serious cases is rising. All right, let's bring in our political correspondent, Hans Brandt, for the very latest on this story. Hi, Hans, good to see you. So Germany's Center for Disease Control has raised the risk level now to high for this coronavirus pandemic and is warning that strict measures need to be taken in order to prevent millions of people from getting infected. So what kind of further measures are meant by this?
I think what the leader of the institute was referring to are the measures that we have been reporting about in the last 24 hours or so. In other words, the increased lockdown of German cities and of Germany as a whole. Certain shops that do not sell essential goods are to be closed, and other shops are restricted in their opening hours. Restaurants are restricted in their opening hours. Cinemas, gyms and all those kinds of institutions are being closed down. These measures are still to be implemented in various regions of the country because the actual measures have to be decided by Germany's federal states. So they haven't in fact been put into effect across Germany yet. And in addition, those things that were announced today by the foreign minister, warnings against traveling anywhere in the world, and generally warnings for people not to travel at all, to stay at home. So those are the measures that are about to be put into place. In addition, there are additional measures to be taken at hospitals, because some hospitals now are getting to see a large number of serious cases of coronavirus infection, and the measures that need to be taken there are to make it possible to treat all of those additional patients.
Hans, you mentioned the German foreign minister speaking earlier. He's also announced this €50 million operation to bring home German citizens who are stranded abroad. Let's take a listen to what he said a little bit earlier.
The Ministry of Foreign Affairs has agreed on a unique program with commercial airlines, which will bring back German travelers from particularly affected areas within the next few days. We are talking above all about Morocco, the Dominican Republic, the Philippines, Egypt and the Maldives. In coordination with us, the airlines will make flights available for this airlift.
All right, Hans, what are we talking about here? I mean, how many people are stuck and where will they be transferred to?
We haven't been given exact figures. The foreign minister talked about 5,000 people alone in Morocco. So if we reckon on the other countries that they were talking about, several thousand people from those countries, I imagine we could get to somewhere close to 10,000 people that will be returning in the next few days. Where exactly they will be coming to here in Germany, we don't know yet. I presume that depends on where the aeroplanes that transport them will land, and possibly on which regions of the country these German tourists come from. But it's going to be a major operation. Something like this has never been done by Germany before.
Hans, we see countries like Italy, Spain, now also France, issuing complete lockdowns of those countries. Do you think we could see Germany take a similar step?
That would be the last available measure that Germany still could impose. What's happening at the moment is, of course, something similar, but not quite a lockdown, not quite the situation that somebody who goes out on the streets is to be fined or will be sent back by the police. Germany, the central government, would need to impose a state of emergency to give itself those kinds of powers, and that hasn't happened yet. I think the German government is hoping that the measures that have been imposed so far will finally lead to a slowdown in the spread of the virus, and that this last measure that is still possible, a total lockdown, may not be necessary.
All right, our political correspondent Hans Brandt reporting for us there. Thank you very much. Meanwhile, one of the candidates for the leadership of Chancellor Angela Merkel's Conservative Party has tested positive for COVID-19. Friedrich Merz says he only has mild symptoms and will stay at home until the end of next week. The number of confirmed cases in Germany is approaching 8,000. Berlin has not yet imposed a general lockdown, but its appeals for people to stay home and avoid unnecessary contact are having an effect, as our political correspondent Simon Young reports.
There's a curious calm in the normally pulsating heart of Berlin. On Tuesday morning, far fewer people than usual were out and about in the German capital. Foreign Minister Heiko Maas announced another unprecedented measure, a travel warning for the entire planet. He said no unnecessary trips should be made. In addition, the government will provide 50 million euros so German citizens currently abroad can come home.
The Ministry of Foreign Affairs has agreed on a unique program with commercial airlines, which will bring back German travelers from particularly affected areas within the next few days. We are talking above all about Morocco, the Dominican Republic, the Philippines, Egypt and the Maldives. In coordination with us, the airlines will make flights available for this airlift.
On Monday, drastic steps were announced to beat the virus, shutting many shops, apart from essential businesses such as food stores and pharmacies. Civic life is shutting down. Schools, theatres and museums are being closed nationwide. Chancellor Merkel asked Germans to stay at home, but strict controls on movement, as in France, have not been imposed so far.
These measures are unprecedented in our country. They are severe, but they are necessary at this time in order to reduce the number of personal contacts, which reduces the number of people falling ill and, in turn, the number of severe cases.
As even children's playgrounds are deserted, many parents are having to stay at home to look after their families. The government is offering them extra support.
What we're seeing above all is that many families are wondering about money. They want to know how to deal with a drop in income. This is a huge issue. It's not a private matter. It needs to be fixed and the state must help.
Politicians continue to search for the right responses to this rapidly evolving crisis. Merkel and the other EU leaders will come together to discuss it later on Tuesday by video link.
In the U.S., Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin will ask Congress to approve an $850 billion emergency aid package to protect the economy. It's being reported that these measures include plans to provide relief to the U.S. airline industry, which has suffered tens of billions of dollars in losses due to the pandemic. If approved, this stimulus plan would also help small businesses stay afloat and cut taxes for millions of American workers. All right, let's talk about this story now with TW's financial correspondent, Jose Luis Deado, is down at Wall Street for us. Hi, Jose, good to see you. How is Wall Street reacting to this report?
So far, it seems that it's still very, very early to celebrate. It's been a really choppy start of the trading session already. As we speak, markets are up, but only 54 points, and they were down 200 points. And at the beginning of the trading session, we were up around 500 points. So as you can see, it seems that things could go wrong very quick here in the trading session. The bill that is still in the Senate hands, and it could go up to $850 billion, as you point out, and may also include up to $50 billion to bail out the U.S. airlines. It's still like debated, and timing is key here. A lot of Americans live check to check, and unless they receive immediate assistance and basically cash, as some senators are proposing, they'll probably won't be able to pay the rent, pay their mortgage, or even buy food, which could make a bad situation even worse. Also, there is a lot of talk of why bailing out airlines and not the full range of industries affected by the current situation.
Was it beyond airlines and these tax cuts? I mean, looking at the big picture here, how could this bill really help stabilize what is such a volatile situation on the markets right now?
Well, I think that, as I said before, timing is key. Any measures need to protect consumers and consumer confidence to make sure they can survive without the major disruptions already during the current situation. And also, they will keep some confidence to restart their lives as usual when this situation is over. But it's going to be very difficult since economists are already projecting a contraction of 5% in the U.S. economy for the second quarter and around 80 million jobs are at risk right now. So the goal should be have some kind of stimulus ready as soon as possible, probably this week, because if by any chance senators go into recess or leave town, there is a chance they could not be able to return back to DC in time for a vote if things get delayed.
Jose, you said markets started a bit choppy today. Yesterday, we saw the worst drop since 1987. I mean, give us an idea of what things are like there down on Wall Street. I mean, what are traders saying?
Traders here at the exchange try to keep a smile on their faces, but they say that this situation, it's uncharted territory. They welcome the monetary stimulus from the Fed. Now they are waiting for the fiscal one from Washington, but they are clear to say that it is too early to call a bottom in the stock market. In the meantime, markets are still open, as you can see. The exchange is open, but all of us need to be checked before entering the building and the trading floor. And in a worst case scenario, the trading floor here at the New York Stock Exchange can fully operate electronically if they decide to close it at some point.
All right, our financial correspondent there, Jose Luis de Aro on Wall Street. Thank you very much. Meanwhile, researchers in the U.S. have started testing a potential coronavirus vaccine on volunteers. 4 of them received their first injection on Monday as part of the study's first stage of human trials. The test will see 45 healthy individuals receive 2 varying dosages 1 month apart, while scientists check for side effects and the impact on their immune systems. Now, even if all goes well, a vaccine is unlikely to be available for at least 1 year. All right, let's talk about the progress on a vaccine. We can speak to Christian Lindmeier. He's a spokesman for the World Health Organization, and he joins us from Geneva. Christian, thank you for being with us here on DW. How promising do you think the talk of a vaccine is at this stage?
Well, thank you. Good day. We are receiving good news from all around the world on about from 40 different places on treatments or vaccine progress. So any news in this direction is great, of course, right now. But as good as it sounds and as good as it is, let's hear also that last part of your message, which means by the time we will have such a vaccine in hand, it will take about a year. So with all the great news, we need to focus on today and tomorrow more than in 365 days.
Okay, Christian, and that's what countries are doing. They're imposing partial to complete lockdowns, these restrictions we're seeing really across Europe. How long will these restrictions need to be in place?
That is a very difficult question. It depends on situation of each country. As you just reported about France, they have a complete lockdown, which is actually where I'm calling from right now, right across the border from Geneva, Switzerland. Geneva has a different situation. Germany has a different situation. Poland has. So each country is implementing the best to their knowledge and to their experience and to their expertise, and they will also keep these measures as best as they will see it until most likely cases subside or the curve is going down. Let's not forget one of the most important parts right now is to curb this steep rise of cases, not only for the infections as such, but because all of these infected people, all those who need to get care in the hospitals for milder symptoms or for heavy symptoms or even need emergency care, they take away space in the hospitals, and which means we do not have space for so many cases nowhere in Europe. And other people who have any of the other many diseases, emergencies, accidents will have trouble finding space. So this is why it's so important to curb that steep rise of cases, to make it flatter, to have the health system be able to cope with influx and of patients.
Okay. All right. So lockdowns gain us time. But Christian, are they enough? Because we've seen countries like South Korea be more effective by testing across the board, constantly testing. Why shouldn't Europe do the same thing?
Actually, you have a very important point there. So this lockdown can only be part of a comprehensive approach. And the most important things are 3, as you just mentioned: test, test, test. This was repeated yesterday again by the Director General of the World Health Information Organization, and it was sent to all governments of the world, testing and following every single patient and their contacts, their possible contacts, is of utmost importance. And we can only encourage every government and every authority in this world to do their best to do these three things: test, test, test.
All right, we'll have to leave it there. Christian Lindmeier, spokesman for the World Health Organization. Thank you for your insights.
France has joined neighbouring Italy and Spain in ordering a complete lockdown to try and halt the spread of coronavirus. President Emmanuel Macron described the situation as a public health war. The virus has killed nearly 150 people in France and infected more than 6,600.
As the clock struck noon in France, the lockdown took effect. People must now carry a document justifying their reasons for going outdoors. Only essential trips and exercise alone are permitted. Those who break the rules will be fined. The president has called the outbreak a war. 100,000 police officers have been deployed across the country. Officials stress that everyday life must be upended to contain the virus.
To give you some examples, a family lunch, dinner with friends, a football game with friends, a game of cards, all of that which might not seem important normally is now forbidden. Not only ill-advised, but forbidden. Each of those meetings, let's not play it down, is a moment when the virus can be transmitted. It means running the risk of speeding the spread of COVID-19.
In the capital, Paris, an unusual quiet has taken hold. Reactions to the lockdown are mixed.
I think it's a bit too strict. Yeah, you should be able to walk on the streets if you want. People should be to choose what they want, I think.
I think it's necessary. It's an epidemic that's spreading exponentially. So is the contamination. There are many asymptomatic carriers. I could be one of them.
The health ministry says the restrictions could be eased in a fortnight if the virus is sufficiently contained.
Straight to the French capital then, where we join journalist Catherine Field. Welcome, Catherine. Tell us more about people's reactions to this lockdown.
Well, Phil, a lot of people are just taking it on the chin, realising that they have to be responsible about this. That having been said, police in Paris have set up some 150 checkpoints, mostly on the exit to Paris, to check people, see whether they are really going home or if they're just going out to go shopping. We've got some 3,000 police patrolling the capital, also checking to see if everyone knows what's going on, and also just making sure that shops are closed. We've had quite a few incidents, according to the prefect of police, of shops staying open, of hoping that they can at least shift some goods, get some money in before the big lockdown comes. We've also seen at the Gare de Montparnasse, one of the larger railway stations here in Paris, a lot of people still fleeing the capital. They're saying that if there's going to be a lockdown, they want to be in the countryside. And police have said they've got till this evening to get out of Paris, and then the lockdown will really come into effect, Phil.
And so how is France's health infrastructure coping?
At the moment, mostly the region in the east of France is struggling. And those regions, the Alsace and the Moselle, alongside the German border, they are really struggling. There were big clusters of the virus there in the early days. And we're hearing both from the prefect of Alsace and from the health department in Moselle that they are reaching saturation point. And they're just hoping that that promise that the President Emmanuel Macron made last night when he said that the army would come into that region and set up military field hospitals, that will come sooner rather than later, because they really are struggling. Meanwhile, here in Paris, they're saying that it's tough, but they're still on top of it. But what's worrying them are the large numbers of people who are coming in who are younger than 60 years old. A lot of people had thought this virus only affected older people, but there's a lot of younger people, they say, coming in, and that is concerning to them.
OK, so that's the health impact. Let's talk about the money. What's being done to lessen the economic impact?
Okay, you've got two strains here. On the one hand, you have got what the Ministry of Finance announced this morning. There was about 45 billion euros going to be put aside to help companies through this next couple of weeks. And that will mean giving them money, make sure they can keep operating, make sure they can pay staff, even though those staff may still be at home. The government's also said that companies won't have to, for the time being, pay their gas, electricity and water bills. The Minister of Finance also said, unfortunately, that France will probably go into recession now, but he had some very comforting words for companies. He said that if need be, France will nationalize firms if it comes to that. And that comes on top of the big bundle of money, I mean, 300 billion euros that Emmanuel Macron, the president, said yesterday would be made available to make sure that the country just doesn't fall apart economically. Both of them, the Minister of Finance and the president, have said the money will be there. Don't worry. If France sticks together, everyone stays home and nobody loses their head, they say France can get through this next 2 weeks.
All right, Catherine Field in Paris, thank you.
Thank you.
Well, schools and daycare centres around the world are closing as authorities try to slow the spread of the coronavirus. Workers in certain essential professions, such as medical staff, are reporting for work. As more extreme measures are introduced, many parents have been wondering how to explain the virus to their children. The Norwegian Prime Minister held a special coronavirus briefing only for children to try and answer their questions.
Why am I not allowed to celebrate my birthday?
It's because many people should not be gathered in order to prevent people from being infected. Or you can be a bit extra creative and try to celebrate via FaceTime, or think of another way to celebrate that you think is good.
I think that if someone in the class has a birthday, all the others should call and sing a birthday song individually to have something to do.
So how should we talk to our children about this pandemic? Dr. Angharad Rudkin is a child clinical psychologist from the UK's University of Southampton. She consulted on the parenting book, What's My Child Thinking? Welcome to DW, Doctor. Many parents have an instinct to try and shield their children, not just from the virus, but also from all the bad news about. Is that the right approach?
It depends, really. I mean, you don't want to shield them and pretend that nothing is happening, because children are very, very clever and they figure out that things aren't quite the same as they usually are. But you don't want to overload them with too much information either, because children think about things differently to adults and they worry about different things. So whereas they may not need to know the biochemistry of how coronavirus is passed from one person to another, what they do want to know is, like your footage showed, what's going to happen for my birthday, and will I still be able to go on my school trip? So we need to give them enough information that they understand a little bit about what is going on, but they don't need to know as much as we do as adults.
Right. So, and the reality of the situation is often when schools are closed or when the kids are not at school, they'd go to their grandparents to be looked after. How do we explain to children that that's not happening this time without sort of worrying them that granny's going to die?
Yes, by explaining that this is an illness that seems to particularly hit older people and people at risk. So we want to protect Granny and Grandad from getting ill. Reassure them that Granny and Grandad are doing everything that they can to stay safe, and that you can stay in touch through Skype or FaceTime, or you could even write letters to them, but that we might not see them for a little while. If your child asks, well, does that mean Grandad's going to die? We need to be very honest with our children and not make promises that we can't keep. So you don't want to say, of course he won't, because we just don't know. So you need to say, well, we're doing everything we can to keep Grandad safe, and chances are he's going to be absolutely fine, and we just need to let them know how much we still think about him, even if we can't see him. So it's a lot for children to take in, and children tend to take their emotion from parents. So if you're very anxious as a parent, chances are your child's going to also feel very anxious. So you've got to try and stay very logical and rational as much as possible when you're with your children, and don't let them watch too much news, don't let them listen to the news too much either, just so that they only get the information that they need.
All right, I think that's very clear. Thank you so much for that, Dr. Angharad Rudkin from the University of Southampton.
You're welcome.
We'll turn now to the world of sport, which has also been hit hard by the pandemic. European football's governing body, UEFA, has confirmed that the Euro 2020 tournament will be postponed until next year. It's also put all other men's and women's competitions on hold. UEFA's been holding meetings with clubs and member associations today in hopes that postponing Euro 2020 means domestic leagues will be able to play into May and June and complete their seasons and minimising the financial impact. More from Jonathan Crane from DW Sport. Welcome, Jonathan. So that's the UEFA decision in a nutshell. What's behind it?
Well, I think they've basically realised that hosting such a tournament in the current climate is totally unrealistic. They've seen the piling up of fixtures in the domestic leagues. They've said it's more important to help the domestic leagues try to finish their season. I think they also want to ease the burden on the 12 countries that were due to host this tournament. They will now get their chance in 2021. The tournament there due to run from the 11th of June to the 11th of July. Now, as we said, UEFA's decision followed 2 video conferences today, one with clubs and leagues, the other with the 55 member associations. UEFA President Alexander Chefrin praised the solidarity showed by everyone because this was obviously no easy decision. Now it's all going to be about the detail. UEFA has set up a working group that will look at how the football calendar is going to look going forward and also assess the financial consequences of postponing such a tournament.
So where does this leave clubs and leagues around Europe?
Well, primarily it does give them the chance to finish the season. We've seen how the coronavirus has caused all major European leagues, including the Bundesliga, to grind to a halt. And that's caused so much uncertainty. Will the competitions be finished? What will happen with promotions and relegations? And what about players whose contracts are due to expire? Yesterday, we heard from the head of the German Football League, Christian Seifert, and he talked about how football in Germany alone employs 56,000 people. So imagine all the uncertainty for them. Millions, hundreds of millions of euros also at stake for clubs and TV revenue. Now, of course, postponing Euro 2020 does give a bit more breathing space. The domestic leagues could play into May and June, but it all depends really on how the coronavirus develops itself, and that's the big question mark.
And what about some of the other competitions due to take place?
Well, as we said at the top, all UEFA competitions now on hold. That includes the Champions League and Europa League. The Copa America, which is the national competition for South America, that's also been postponed to 2021. But of course, this is now causing a pile-up of tournaments as well. The Women's Euros were due to take place next year in London from July the 7th. Talk now from member associations that they will be moved to 2022. That's not the only clash, though. The UEFA will be competing with FIFA next year if FIFA holds its Club World Cup. That's Gianni Infantino's pet project. So a lot of discussions between organisations need to take place. One silver lining, potentially, though, the World Cup that would normally take place in June, July 2022 will take place in November in Qatar because of the weather. So that does give some free time, maybe, in that summer to play some of these tournaments that have been postponed.
I think we need a spreadsheet.
I think we do. Very complicated.
All right. Jonathan Crane, DW Sport, thank you.
You're welcome.